Um,
Hope
Thank
that's
you.
okay.
The recording, this meeting is now being recorded. So you know you can leave if you don't want to be part of the recorded discussion. My name is Katie King. I translate from the Spanish. I am from Seattle, live currently outside of Washington, D.C. And I am very happily a member of the DC Alt group these days. And so really excited to be helping by hosting this fabulous event with three amazing speakers. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, although I think probably most of you already know them. So first of all, Nancy Naomi Carlson won the 2022 Oxford Weidenfeld Translation Prize, author of 14 titles, 9 of them translated. Her second full-length poetry collection, as well as her co-translation of Wende Guerra, was covered in the New York Times. Solio, Seagull 2024, her translation of Samira Negroche from Algeria just arrived. She's the translations editor for On the Seawall, which you can find at www.ronslate.com. Catherine E. Young is the author of poetry collections Women Drinking Absinthe and Day of the Border Guards. She's translated Russian language poetry and prose from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Ukraine, earning awards from the Granum Foundation, Pushkin House, and the National Endowment for the Arts, among others. She served as the inaugural poet laureate for Arlington, Virginia. Tanya Paperny is a writer, editor, and translator in Washington, D.C., whose work has appeared in The Atlantic, The Washington Post, LitHub, and elsewhere, and is included in a scholarly edition of Palgrave Macmillan. Tanya has received awards from the D.C. Commission on the Arts and Humanities, Biographers International Organization, Vermont Studio Center, and Art Omni. She directed the DC Area Literary Translators Network from 2015 to 2017. So this is quite an impressive group, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. If I can ask everyone to just mute your microphones until we have a Q&A time, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So please, let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tanya. Nice to see some familiar faces, including Neil, who I haven't seen in 14 years, I think. So this will be informal. There's a lot of different things we can cover. I mean, we have an agenda and things we want to talk about, but because in particular Nancy and Kate have won so many awards, we want to make sure that we talk about the things that are most, interesting and useful to you. So please, if you want to interrupt in the chat or in person, I would welcome it even before the Q&A. I just made that executive suggestion. I hope my co-presenters are okay with it. I'm here holding down the sort of less prestigious end of this panel to be the humble participant, because I haven't actually got a translation award in a long time, but I'm trying to get them right now so I can speak from the perspective of a impatiently waiting applicant. So the goals for today are to cover kind of the spectrum of the types of translations you can get, the types of funding and support you can get for literary translation. And it's important to mention that those can appear at different stages. So some opportunities are for a work in progress. Some are for a finished product that doesn't yet have a publisher. Some are for publishers who are, about to publish something to support their costs of paying a translator and getting a book out. Some of them are awards with financial gifts for a book that came out in the previous year. So there's and then there's some that are just sort of merit-based, like congratulating mid-career or very established translators, thanking them for their commitment and service to the field. So we're not going to split our presentation among those lines because we're just going to have the three of us go in order. But I think that's just something worth paying attention to and thinking about your projects in terms of where they are and what stage, that whether it's relevant for you. And one sort of caveat that I mean not to be depressing, but to just set some realistic expectations, is that there was an Authors Guild survey of literary translators a few years ago, and the conclusion was that it's nearly impossible to make a living as a literary translator in the United States. I don't think that will surprise anyone in this room, but I think the idea for this session, at least from my perspective, is that it's about me getting some money so that I can fund my time to focus on a project. There's no way that I'm getting funding to actually honor how much time it takes me. The funding that I get in some ways is symbolic, and it's about, getting recognition to help the author that I translate get more visibility in English language audiences and things like that. But I'm never being paid what I should be paid for literary translation, and that's something that I accept. I think the only exception is the National Endowment for the Arts, which I believe both of my presenters have received, and I am hoping to get this year. I think it's, among the larger sum of money that you can get. So I will hand it over to Nancy to talk specifically about the grants that she has won and to give a little bit of insight into each of those.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's great to see faces. That's the beauty of pandemic. It made us go virtual and see everybody. And I echo what Tanya has said and Katie so far. With I went for years going, I've never won anything. I've never won anything. I've been a shortlisted. I was a finalist, but a long list of all the people who are being acknowledged, but I never won anything. And if only I could win something. And in some ways, winning something didn't really change much. But on the other hand, it did. It made me less hungry and less jealous and less envious of what others had won, because I could say, well, I won something here. And the thing about awards, prizes, you get rejected, you don't lose so many times more than you win anything. And so much of it can be the will of who the jury is, what is in vogue at the time, the language you translate. And I am in charge of letting people in. I was trying to not be the host, but so when I pause and I go, oh, look, somebody is waiting to come in. So that's for me, keeping an eye on that. So all that to say is my general advice is don't expect to win. Don't expect you'll get that residency, even though you know half the jury and you have a great project. If your expectations are low, and that's maybe how I live life, and that's maybe a bad way, but I don't, it makes me keep going. It makes me apply more. It makes me have hope that in the next thing I applied for, because if I do win something, then that elation is so wonderful. It probably lasts for a month, which is much more than a day or an hour, and keeps me going there. So we're talking here about this like, oh yeah, we won this, we won that and all, but how about we lost this? We were devastated by that. I applied 8 times for this award and still haven't gotten it. This is what that covers up. So I think we agreed that first we were going to talk about the NEA. And that seems to be something that people have lots of questions about. And I think we have some NEA winners in the audience as well. But that seems to be something that NEA sends representatives to the Alta conference, and they Amy Stoles and Katie Day sit in a room and they talk to prospective people who want to go and apply, because they wanted people to apply when I applied. And for me, I had applied once, twice, I think, with René Chal. René Chal, a dead white French guy. And I applied with the same application twice and got nowhere, but you can get feedback. And so I called to hear the feedback, tell me what I did. And it was It was astonishing and puzzling at the same time. So the first time I applied, it was that the expert, there are two sections. There's an expert reader, and I've since served as an expert reader as well. So the expert reader gives an opinion, and then the committee gives an opinion. And in the first case, it was the expert reader who loved it and who said wonderful things about it. And the expert reader ranks you on the merit of the project as well as how you carried it off, your translation ability, whatever that may mean. Two things: the merit of the project, the author's reputation, or why, okay, you did a great job translating, but why do we need to hear this author in English? What's so important about them? And typically, if your author has won prizes, that helps, or if they're emerging, but they're so astonishing, that really helps as well. So those two things, both the committee and the expert reader are evaluating, and that's it. There's a space for merit of the project and who you're translating, and then there's a space for how the translation is coming off. And so the first time, the expert reader loved it. The committee didn't like it. They said, "Why do we need René Chal? He's been translated so much." Nah. So I didn't get it. But they gave me certain line by line feedback too. So I called and got that. That's really important. The second time around, it was the reverse. And the expert reader was saying, "Why did I switch the order of the two nouns in that line when the French had it?" So then you have the idea, I make fun of it, like the translation police. Sometimes you get expert readers who are the translation police, and they want you to do it the way it is, and on that continuum of how close you are to the original. Everybody's got style, taste, and they want you to be close to that literal meaning, even though they want you to be creative and get that tone and all these other things. Whereas other people go, "Yeah, forget that, that's there, but we want you to be experimental. We want you to make it really exciting." So here it was, and I was totally confused. But the thing I came out of after hearing the just different opinions was they didn't like Chal and not to apply this with the same project. And generally they say not to apply with the same project. So some people say to do that. But so then I thought, why don't I go and find the most exciting writers I can? And I received the award once for my writer from Djibouti, from Africa, Abdurrahman Waberi. And then I received it again because you have to wait, and Kate is waiting her time before she applies again. I think you wait, I have to figure out FY versus the year count. And you wait 6 go rounds, I think, or possibly 7. And then I won again with Alain Mabonkou from Congo Brazzaville, again from Africa. And so my takeaway is, say you're going to translate someone from Africa, don't translate anybody dead, because it's just my small little experience here. And as the expert reader, my takeaway is I really count the merit. I ask myself, should this author be translated? Like, who am I to say, yeah, let's bring this voice into English, but not this voice? But is it an exciting project? Is it Marie de la France? Who I'm so interested to see what she was writing way back when, even though some people might find that boring. But I try to be open to it, and it's so important how you present the project, because you contextualize it. You get the reader to be excited on that 1.5 pages or 2 pages that they give you. That's your job. But then I also look at the French, if it's French, and usually as an expert reader, they'll give you your language. So then you look and you compare, and then if something jumps out where this is like, oh my gosh, or if it doesn't read smoothly in English, and that's my bias, then I'm going to go, I don't know about that. And so then the expert reader gives a grade, aha, a number, ooh, and then passes it along. And the committee doesn't even know who the expert reader is. And the committee sees what the expert reader has read because I can't evaluate a text in Bulgarian to see how accurate it is. And then the committee decides amongst themselves. And I think they rank it originally without talking to each other. And then or that's the way it was when I served. We had a list, and then we had the highest ranking, the lowest ranking, the middle ones. And then you could talk about it and you could switch your rankings based on what you're hearing from your fellow jury members. And then you get to rank again and do the rank. And then they add up and see how much money they have. And then they say, well, we have to cut off after 16 or 18, depending. And then they get their list of winners. So I talked probably too long, and I'll pass it to Kate.
So I think I will just, for anybody who doesn't know, I'll just talk very quickly about the NEA in general. It's a big fellowship. If you don't know, you can win up to $25,000. The deadline for applications is always in mid-January. And as I think is clear, this is the big one. You get this grant early in the process. The funding is generous enough to enable you to finish your entire translation. It gives you instant credibility with publishers. I happened to get the NEA for my very first full-length project, and I still had trouble finding a publisher, but I'm pretty sure that the grant made it a lot easier than it would have been otherwise. And as Nancy has pointed out, if your application isn't successful on the first go around, you can get the feedback from the NEA and that will help you apply again. Something I want to say in terms of process, and this is really important, do not wait until mid-January to start putting together your application. And they even tell you on the NEA website to start your submission a couple of weeks ahead of the due date. The application process is long, it's cumbersome. You used to have to convert all your documents into PDFs. I don't know if you have to do that, but it's just a pain in the neck and it's in the fine print. You also have to submit a lengthy translated sample as part of your project. So, it's a great grant. It's the big one. It's the one you want. But they make you work for it. Tanya, do you want to add anything to this?
Sure. Yeah, I applied in January and won't be notified until December because that's the government. But I think having been involved in government grants for a lot of different things, like government technology is bad, the websites are, obsolete and things are not clear. So more than any other grant, I recommend starting it really early and downloading. Sometimes they'll have like the full text of the application, because what I've had happen to me a number of times is you think you're doing it and then you log in to actually like copy and paste it, and then you learn that there's like a word limit or something. So I just like pay very close attention to all that, because it could be ignored just on the basis of you having done something technically incorrect. So yes, it is cumbersome, converting everything to PDF. This has to be one PDF with this file name and blah, blah, blah. I think the other small piece of advice that maybe people already do, and this applies for anything, is I've had a number of translation grants that have detailed requirements to prove how many number of pages of literary translation I've had published, and have to have very detailed lists and the page numbers of the journals that it appeared in. And I could share it later or send it around afterwards, but it's almost like a annotated bibliography of my own publishing as a literary translator. And the sad reality is that a number of the places I've published, including the Literary Review, which is so sad, don't exist anymore, and the website is just gone. Like all the archives have evaporated. So I know this as a journalist almost more than I do as a translator, where you have to maintain your own archives. So anytime you have a translation published, whether in print or online, scan it, save it as a PDF, write it down. I have like a Google Drive where I save a PDF version of everything, because when the site goes down and then you can't find it anymore and you have to prove it, it can be really onerous. So just keep good records of your own stuff. And then the thing I applied for this year, I would just look at recent applicants. So I'm applying for a contemporary Ukrainian writer whose book is about the current full-scale invasion. And on one hand, it feels like very important and timely. On the other hand, I applied in January and I won't hear back until December. And unfortunately, the world has sort of moved on from Ukraine. And when I looked, I saw that last year a number of Ukrainian writers got different awards all over translation, which is good. Like, I'm so glad that Ukrainian literature, not just like post-Soviet or, thinking about it as Russian, is getting the attention it deserves. But I think in some ways I may have missed the window. And so I would just sort of be thoughtful about that. Not that there's anything you could do. Yeah, that's all I'll say about the NEA. I hope to get it.
Hope you do.
It'd be so great.
It is honestly, if you're gonna get a translation award, it's the one you want, simply because the money is so freeing, and especially if you're at the beginning or in the early part of your career, it allows you to do so much more than you maybe thought that you could do. So that's the NEA, and that's the big one. But we also have a number of other awards that we want to talk about, and I think the person who's going first is Nancy.
Thank you, and good luck, Tanya, on the NEA. I'm going to talk first about grants for things that are not finished. They're not books yet, but you're working on them. And then I'll talk about books once they're done. And for me, the big one, which I've applied for many, many, many times, is the Guggenheim. You don't have your book, you have a sample, and I have been rejected without a word. You don't get any information, you cannot call to find out. I did find out along the way, all these years, that it is an award for mid-career translators. It pays $50,000 or $60,000, I think. Translators, either they pick one or two or none a year. You have to have translated 5 or 6 books. They don't say that, but this was said at a panel at Alta. So that was important for me to know. It's a mystery. They do check on your author with their experts across the country to see their evaluation of whether this is an important person to be translating. And the odds are very, 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 very slim to get one of those. But it's there. And like the Holy Grail, but that's the way it is in this game. If you have this, then you want that, and if you have that, you want that, and if you want this, you want that, and yeah. But for me, applying for the Guggenheim so many times has given me projects. So you apply in September, and then I think, well, I need, and you need a good number for your pages. So fiction is a little easier to do because then you have hundreds of pages. And if you look at past winners, some of them have translated 800 pages. And so you get a sense of who wins these things, but I get a sense of projects. So many of the projects I propose, and then I go, oh, I hope I don't get it. I don't want to have to do that project. But some of them I propose, and then I really want to do the project, and I do it anyway because I'm excited about the project. So it keeps me going in that way. But I don't know if I'm going to apply for the Guggenheim again this year. It might be time for a break. So things that I have won. The Albertine, and Katie put the link in the chat. The Albertine Translation Fund is from the French Cultural Services. It is for it must be published by a US-based publisher to get the money. Now, you don't need the publisher when you apply, but because I tend to get published by Seagull Books in Calcutta, distributed in the UK, but also distributed in the US by the University of Chicago Press, it doesn't count. So I needed to first figure out whether I was willing to have a US-based publisher. And then I proposed the project. Actually, my author, the one from the NEA, Abdu, came to me and said, oh, let's apply for this. And so it's much easier to apply for than the NEA. You don't have to really go into huge detail about your project. You have to have a work sample. You have to be able to get to them a copy of the French. It has to have been published in France in the last 10 years. So we had a thing because Abdu's book was coming out in August, but you know how things are. And the book wasn't really ready for the deadline, but they work with you. They're very kind people to work with. And they said, well, we'll give it another week and we'll see if the book comes there. And so the award is $2,000 goes to the press who publishes you, which is great because if you don't have a press, you can go, hey, look, I'm bringing money to you if you publish me. And then they pay half of your translator's fee up to $5,000, which it's not clear if it's $2,000 plus your translator's fee equals $5,000 or something different. And so I had a publisher who had expressed some interest in this book before I applied. And long story short, it went down to the wire because I needed to have a contract from the publisher to access that money. And it took a year for them to contact the foreign rights with the publisher and have it. And then it went down to the wire and we finally got a contract to show them. Yeah, so that was exciting. And it'll come from the African Poetry Book Fund. They'll be the publishers, University of Nebraska Press. So I was so glad to have that lovely home for these Djiboutian translations, the third poetry book of Abdu. Then the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County, I only mentioned that because that was one of my first ones. And I don't know that Montgomery County is really funding translations. It helped that someone on the jury, you know how you find out a little bit about it, and she understood what translation was, but you're in competition with the ballet and with the visual arts. And I served on the jury there, and they say that they're looking for tadpole projects, helping tadpoles grow. So it seems like an emerging pool, looking, no pun intended. And then you have to live in Montgomery County for a certain number of years in Maryland. And most of you don't. But I mentioned that because that funded my trip to Martinique. And I got to meet Suzanne Dracius, my author. And you have to break down how you're going to use the money. NEA and Guggenheim, you don't have to say how you use the money, but here you had to have a budget and then they awarded you based on your budget. So the moral of this is look into your state and your county to see what kinds of creative writing grants they offer and whether translation is appropriate for it. And then there's the CLIMP, nobody knows, the Community of Literary Magazines and Presses, CLMP. And they have something called the Firecracker Awards. And it's for independently published literature by the small presses, but they have to be a member of CLIMP to be considered. And I never heard of the CLIMP Awards until somebody said, congratulations, you're a finalist for the CLIMP. And I said, oh, you must be mistaken. It must be someone else. I never applied for it. I didn't know anything about it. So it turned out I was the only translation on it because they consider all these other fiction, creative nonfiction, poetry. And I didn't win. I think the winning brings money, but being a finalist was kind of neat. Say I was a finalist for the CLIMP Award. And they do pay the press and they pay the author or translator. You have to be published in the US. Again, it's something that I don't do too much of. But before I went to Seagull, I was with Tupelo Press, and they're US based. And they were able to get the attention of the CLIMP folks. Personal experience applying but not winning the Penheim. I don't know if I applied for the Penheim. I may not, but that is for emerging translators. And apparently it's extremely difficult to win. And they give you $2,000 to $4,000. And it's exciting to have that. You don't need a publisher. And maybe I made that blotted out of my memory whether I applied for that or not. Maybe I didn't. But that's worth mentioning because that's very exciting to get a career launched, a translation career launch. From personal experience winning. So this is after the book has come out, and this is my one claim to fame for winning something. Maybe I'd heard of the Oxford Weidenfeld Prize. It's in the UK, and the book has to have been published in the UK. So finally, something for Seagull. I don't even remember. I didn't apply. My press sent my book in, and then I think it was Jeffrey Zuckerman who congratulated me on and said, "Hey, I saw it on Twitter. You're longlisted for the Oxford Weidenfeld." And I said, "What?" Because you never, they don't tell you. They just announce it or tell your press. And so I looked it up to see, and then the competition was staggering. Danny Hahn was one of the finalists, Sasha Dugdale, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is impossible. But I was really thrilled that I had that, and I won't bore you with the long story, but I decided when I was shortlisted that I would go to the UK. For me, in the height of pandemic, I hadn't traveled in a year or two, and I still wear a mask now. But I put on the mask and I went to the UK, even though no one had said anything. And I got to the UK, and then I told everyone, well, I know I didn't win because they didn't tell me ahead of time, because they often tell you ahead of time. And they all went, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then someone told me right before, well, no one knows. And then I said, oh, that changes everything. Then I got nervous for an hour and couldn't eat or anything. And then we went to the auditorium, and we waited, and they announced I'd won, and I was the only American as a finalist who was there, and I was truly shocked. I definitely was, and I had told the audience there were 100 people because of the publishers all coming, and my publisher happened to be in the UK, Shinandini, the graphic artist, and she had come for that too. And I won. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And cried and told them I had no speech, and then thanked everybody. And then I said, oh, my author. Yes, I couldn't do this without my author. And this prize is for translation. It's for the translator. You don't give the money to the author. You don't give the money to the press. It's for the craft of your translation and, of course, the project. So the project had significance as well. And they recognize that about the history of the coolies, negative word, coolitude. So it had, my writer gave voice to the millions of men and women who came from China and India and were going to Mauritius, the port, and either stayed there to work the sugarcane fields or were sent to the colonies overseas. So it had depth. Yeah, so that happened 2 years ago. And so then that kind of calmed me down a little bit. The Sarah Maguire, what also helped is that Sarah Maguire is something I really hadn't heard much about either, UK based, but it's a living poet that you translate from beyond Europe, but you can be here as a US person, and you can have a publisher, I believe, in the United States. And it's a biennial award for the best book of poetry in English translation. The winning poet and their translators will split an award of £3,000 between them. And the Oxford Weidenfeld was £2,000. A short list of up to 7 titles will be included in the Poetry Book Society because it's part of the London Poetry Translation Center. And they were lovely. And so I became a finalist. It was exciting to be a finalist because they have you read as a finalist and make a Zoom recording. But by then my author went off the radar and have not heard from him, and I'm worried about him. So he wasn't willing to make the recording. But the winner was Najwan Darwish was the author, and Karim Abu-Zaid won. And the person, Sarah Maguire, was very much in tune with Arabic translations. And so I suspect many of the winning titles are going to be Arabic translations. But they want underrepresented countries, the global south, too. And so it's a very exciting one to be part of, even as a finalist. And they sent a wonderful box of vegan chocolates for the recording that I made without my author. And they send things every year, little Christmas cards. So they're very sweet. And I made some friends from them too, because you get to know them. The deadline for that is January. It was last year, January. The Oxford Weidenfeld, I think the deadline was December or January. And then some post-book awards, other ones. Oh, so things that I'm associated with, but I haven't really won. And I say really won because it doesn't count to say, even though I did kind of get shortlisted for one of them, but I won't tell you which. But it was an anthology with a lot of authors, and the main person did most of the work. So I'm not saying that. But I sit on the Alta board. And so these I'm invested in for the health of our organization. And the Alta Awards program has 6 awards. You may know the National Translation Award in Poetry, the National Translation Award in Prose. And they have juries who duke it out amongst themselves. Then there's the Alta First Translation Prize. And there's the Italian Prose in Translation Award. There's the Lucien Streich Asian Translation Prize. And there's the Spain USA Foundation Translation Award, which to me is very exciting because I think translators from Spanish have a harder time, like French too, because everybody translates Spanish and French, but it's so different depending on the country, just like it is with Russophone texts and probably other languages. But I find that in many of the juries I sit on, there's like half of the translations are from Spanish. And you have to take that into consideration. Then the PEN Awards. So I'm a member of the PEN Translation Committee, and I see Frida, who is one of the co-chairs of the PEN Translation Committee, and I see Dorothy, who was on the jury that I was on. We were on the award for the PEN Award for Poetry in Translation. And there were 3 of us judging there, and it was all poetry. And so we duked it out amongst ourselves and got to be friends too. We even attend each other's Zoom presentations. The PEN Translation Award in Prose. And then there's a somewhat newish one that was started in 2022. I'm a member of NBCC, which is the National Book Critics Circle. If you write reviews, and if you've written enough reviews, you can apply for membership there. And they have this new prize called the Greg Barrios Book in Translation Prize. And I thought it had to be published in the US. So I was like, who cares? But it turns out that as long as it is distributed in the US, so my technicality of the University of Chicago Press allows it to be considered. Who knew? And so they have a November deadline for books translations that have been published throughout the year of that year. And I think I'm done. And I will turn over the mic to Kate.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to just put 4 links in the chat. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. These are the prizes I'm going to talk about. None of these 4 prizes appears to be on the lists. There's some general lists maintained by various organizations, but the ones I'm thinking about are the lists maintained by Wikipedia, and also a list of maintained by PEN. So you might say that these 4 prizes are a little bit under the radar. And while some of them offer funding, the thing that might be worth even more is the connections you make with these organizations. People who give you money and or awards have a vested interest in believing in you and in promoting your work. So the first one listed here, I'm going to drink something, excuse me, is the Grantham Foundation Translation Prize, and it's open now through the 1st of August. It's open to people who have no more than 5 publications. The prize is $1,500 or more. They keep it a little vague for a translation in progress. The application is really quick, it's easy, it requires a submission of 12 poems or 25 pages of prose. It's a small foundation run by young writers in Hollywood. It's warm, it's personal, it's supportive. They always promote their prize winners on social media. For example, when one of their winners eventually signs a book contract, they are very happy about that. Like Nancy's experience, they sent me a holiday card. It was a really personal holiday card last year. It was really nice. And I had a really excellent experience with the organization. So I really recommend applying. They're anxious for more applicants. Also open now and through July 31st. This is a niche prize, but it's a big one. It's the Stephen Spender Open Prize from the United Kingdom. It's a prize for a single poem in translation. You can submit 60 translated lines, which can be an excerpt of a longer poem with a 300-word commentary. It's an important prize in the UK, and the organization supports translators after they win the prize. I got my first translation commission thanks to Stephen Spender, and I also got my first reading at Pushkin House in London, which is the center of all things Russian in the UK. And that first reading led to numerous others and eventually to a translation prize that was specific to Russian language translators. And I also ended up with a truly magical residency, which was a month in a Scottish castle, thanks to Stephen Spender. So I recommend applying. Speaking of Scotland and that residency, it's called Hawthornden, and the residency is named for that castle, the Hawthornden Castle, which is located outside of Edinburgh. The Hawthornden organization also supports writers and translators with residencies in Italy. And for us, maybe even more important, in 2025, they're opening up a 6-week residency in Brooklyn, in New York, for various creative activities, specifically including translation. And it's going to have a stipend of $5,000. However, this residency isn't for everyone. For example, at the castle, we were required to work in silence all day, and lunch was left outside our doors in little wicker baskets. And they are apparently retaining that requirement for silence during the workday in Brooklyn. However, in the evening, you have dinner with the other fellows, you gather around the fire. We used to gather in the main hall of the castle, and we had sherry, and it was really lovely. At the castle, they deliberately did not provide writers with internet access. This was back in 2015. And although we translators argued that we needed our online resources, I don't know what they'll do about that in Brooklyn. But it obviously is not as easy to keep people offline in Brooklyn as it is hidden in a Scottish glen with the internet. The third prize I want to talk about is the Melinda A. Markham Prize offered by Saturnalia Books. It's for a full-length work of poetry by a female writer, translated by a female. And what they mean by that is anyone who identifies as female, including AFAB non-binary, gender fluid, agender, and intersex. The prize is $2,000 and publication by Saturnalia Books, which is well respected in the poetry world. Submissions for this one open on September 25th, and you have to present the entire manuscript finished. I was a finalist for this prize, and I had really positive interactions with the press during the process. So for little ones or big ones, however, depending on how you read that, but useful, and at least Grantham is very, very new. Also, the Markham Prize is new. So these are, and all of them are opening up and growing. So recommended. On a more general note, I will remind everybody that some funders seek to promote culturally or linguistically specific literature and translation. Nancy's already talked about some of these. For example, in my field, Russian language, up until the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, most of the roughly 60 books published each year in translation from Russian were funded through grants to individual publishers by Moscow's Institute of Translation, which is an arm of the Russian government. And that funding generally went to pay the translator. Nowadays, of course, our publishers couldn't take the money, and that's if they wanted to take it or if we wanted to receive it because of sanctions, which is why you shouldn't expect to see much new published in Russian translation anytime soon. But of course, that's a very specific case, and there are plenty of other governments and international entities that could support translation from, say, French or Dutch or even Kazakh. And they may have funding for you or your publisher. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so, and finally, I just want to say, when you get there, when you get your published books, don't forget, and you have to remind them, to remind your publisher about post-publication awards, such as the Alta National Translation Award, which Nancy talked about, also the National Book Award for Translated Literature. These are awards for which only the publisher can apply. And among these post-publication awards, I want to say just a word about funding possibilities within the area of studies and academic world. For example, the Association of Women in Slavic Studies awarded one of my books some really nice recommendation. And there wasn't any money, but there was recognition after publication. And it was also good recognition from my publisher. So look around and see what your particular area of studies, focus, or academic conference dedicated to your language field can offer in terms of professional awards for publications in the field, and possibly even financial support earlier in the process. I've seen awards for scholars who were working on a particular manuscript. And think outside the box. I remember going to an Alter presentation by Alison Charette, and she was talking about a particular historical society that happened to take an interest in a work that she was translating. And also, don't forget your local arts or state arts council. I hope yours are a little more progressive than mine here in the state of Virginia, which has told me in no uncertain terms that translation is not an art form. Many of them, however, do give grants that can be used to support translation. So I think that's it for me, and I'm going to turn it over to Tanya.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, I'm just going to talk about two opportunities that I got many years ago and haven't gotten any in a long time, but they're both still functioning programs that I encourage you all to consider. The first is the Vermont Studio Center. It's a writer and artist colony in rural Vermont. I think it's one of the largest artist colonies in the United States. So if you're looking for like real peace and quiet, you certainly can find it there, but it's much more of a social one. I think there's like 100 residents at a time across disciplines. And you do get your own private bedroom, your own private studio. The grounds are quite lovely, and there's a big cafeteria. There's not much formal programming. The thing about Vermont Studio Center is that anyone can just pay to go there. I mean, not anyone, but you can apply, and then if you have money, and if you're accepted, then you can go. They also have work study opportunities where you basically like do dishes after dinner in exchange for half of off tuition. But every year they have fellowships, and they change every year. So they tend to be pretty niche. But I would just, if it sounds like a good residency for you, I would just get on their email list and kind of like keep an eye out, because who they are offering full tuition for changes every year. So I got in on something called the Zolan Translation Fellowship, and so it was fully funded, which is the only way it was possible for me to attend. So room and board, and the train from DC to Vermont. So keep an eye on them. And then usually, because it's such a big residency, you don't necessarily get to give a reading, but the fellows did. So me and the other two translators were the only ones in the wider writing residence groups who given the opportunity to give a reading to all the artists. And then the other one is Art OMI. It's a residency in the Hudson River Valley in New York State. Beautiful grounds. They are interdisciplinary: artists, dancers, writers, sculptors. And once a year they have a program called Translation Lab, which is very unusual. They bring the author and the translator together in person to work together. So obviously it needs to be a living author that you translate, and your application, you need to work on it with them. Nothing too onerous to ask of them, but you do need, I think you need like maybe a CV from them. But it's fully funded except for travel, which I realize is a big caveat there, but free room and board. Yes, I'll put it in the chat. Free room and board. It's a very small, I think there's only 5 translator author pairs at a time. I did it in 2010. So myself and the author I translate, there was no formal stipulation. You could do whatever it is that you wanted to do with your time. And then there's a amazing private chef who makes dinner for the group every night and it accommodates everyone's food allergies. It's incredible. And then in the evening, informally in a living room, people give readings. And Neil, who was on the call earlier, maybe still is here, and I did it in 2010. It's open now. Deadline is July 1st. And yeah, unfortunately, they don't fund travel for either person, but room and board is free. Airfare, train, transportation from New York City to the campus. Right. So you have to fund your way to New York somehow. But they do help write a letter of invitation if the author needs help getting a visa to come to the United States. And they were pretty hands-on in that aspect. But if I get it this year, I'll probably do some of my own crowdfunding to help the author I work with get out of Ukraine and hopefully stay in the US for longer than 2 weeks, just so he can get out of a war zone. And if anyone wants to message me offline, I'd be happy to share my past application sample. And I'll put the link in the chat. That's it for me. And I think we were going to shift over to, I wonder if what do you guys think about doing the general advice thing first and then seeing if people will be speaking to or do you want
What
to
I
have,
was thinking of is that we would save the general advice for afterwards and get to the nitty-gritty with our audience sharing some of the grants, residencies, and opportunities they've experienced, then get into question and answer, and then maybe wrap it up with our general advice, if that seems good.
So we'll open it up. So just as a preview, before we hang up, we'll have more time for Q&A, and then we'll also offer just like general tips on making a winning application. But we thought for now we would open it up if any of you have opportunities that haven't been mentioned or that you want to make people aware of. We welcome you to share those either in the chat or come off mute and tell us about it.
And I especially want to invite Neil to talk about his Princeton gig of going up as the resident translator and any other things he wants to share with us for starters.
Sure, I'm glad to. Thanks everyone, this is interesting. Yeah, as Tanya said, she and I were together at Art OMI. I've actually also I've been to OMI twice. I actually now live close to there, but I would still like to go again because it's so great, not least the food. But OMI, they have, I think Tanya maybe made it sound like all those different things are going on at the same time, which would have been nice, but they have dancers at one point and visual artists, different parts of the year. So when it's writers, it's all writers. But apart from the translation lab, their general residency is very international. So there are almost always some translators as well as writers. And so I did it once in that general way, and then the translation lab is separate. So yeah, I a year ago got to be at Princeton for a semester. There's this translator in residence program, which has been running for probably 6 or 7 years by now. I mean, I'll put my email in the chat in a minute. So if you have any specific questions, you can. I'm happy to talk about it. The basic idea is that Princeton wanted the translation program at Princeton. They wanted to bring in practicing literary translators who would continue to do their work during a semester at Princeton, and the other obligations really are to give at least one talk, but also to organize some kind of other events and to interact with the students in various ways. And one of the things that I really appreciate about it, because I know, I think by this point, almost all my predecessors and successors in that program and it's very different every time. They're very good at kind of making it suit your interests and your needs. So some people have actually taught or co-taught. I didn't officially teach a class, but I translate theater, and I did stage readings of 2 of my translations with students. They've also originally they required that you had to have a PhD. Karen Emmerich managed to get that changed, so that's no longer the case. I think one of the things to keep in mind if you apply, they've also started, they've been appointing like 2 years worth of people at a time. So 4 people to cover, which you can understand from their point of view. And I think, when I applied 2 or 3 times before I got it, I think they're obviously trying very hard to bring in a variety of kinds of translator, not only in terms of the language that they work from, but whether they do, they've had people that do journalism and people from with very different kinds of backgrounds. But it's definitely worth throwing your hat in the ring for that. I mean, any of you who can present yourself as practicing experienced literary translators, you would definitely have a chance. So I'll leave it at that, because I'm sure there are other things to get to. I wish that we could talk about the Banff program, which I also did twice, which no longer exists, which is a shame. Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat if anyone wants to follow up.
Neil, I don't see any information and have never been able to find about like how one applies or when to the Princeton. Is it sort of like nomination only, or?
No, there is an official notification about it, I think, or an announcement. I think it's because they've been doing it every 2 years, and then there's no sort of mention about it until the next time around. So I would think that that's probably going to happen again soon. I'll see if I can dig out anything, possibly in an archive on the site, and I'll definitely send that out if I can find it. Okay.
I was just going to offer up a link to a couple of sites. I'm sorry, Neil, were you finished? You have?
I'm finished. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to offer up 2 things. One is an award I applied for and didn't get, but it was really easy to apply for, and I encourage people to look at it. If you translate from the Spanish, I think maybe it's even it has to be from Spain. So it's the Queen Sofia Spanish Institute Prize, and it's a $10,000 award. And I think the application is like 3 pages or something like that. So that might be worthwhile. And the other thing I wanted to mention was something called the Literary Translation Database Extraordinaire that was put together by Charlotte Combe, who works out of the UK. And I'm going to put a link for that as well. And I don't know if she updates it very often, or if it's, there's a team contributing to it, but she's got an amazing number of tabs on it. So publishers, magazines and journals, awards and contests, and separately a sheet for grants and funding. So those are good resources for people. Dorothy, I think you can just dive in and unmute yourself and jump in.
Oh, okay. Happy to be here and happy to talk to all of you. I was going to mention that a possibility some of the times is sometimes a government or foundation or something will offer an award for a particular poet or writer and so forth specifically. One of the awards that I won for my translations of the Chinese poet Xu Zhimour was specifically only for translations of him. It was something called the Xu Silver Willow, and it's offered in conjunction with the Xu Zhimour Festival in Cambridge, England, partly by Cambridge and partly by the Chinese government, but it has to be a poem of his and has to be presented at the festival. Mm. But I know there are other things like that. There's sometimes authors that governments are focusing on.
Lynn, is that a hand raise? You're on mute.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I've been trying to look at my CV in the background and find out what these things. There are two things that I applied for. One is called Big Other. That's what I was trying to get the link to. Here's something that can get you there. It was an award, and it's a post book award, and I had never even heard of it. I don't know. I just saw it on an email or something that went past, and I just thought, what the heck? And I was a finalist. But I don't know. Has anybody heard of that? The Big Other. It's I guess a literary magazine, and they have an award. They have literary awards, including a translation award. And then the other one is you were talking about conferences and things. There's one, let's see, for African literature. I'm trying to find it. Okay. It's called the Edu Snyder Book Prize by the African Studies Association. And this is a prize that happens it's given every other year, and it's given to the author, not the translator. But my author was nice enough to insist that I also be present at the reading, because they read it in English translation. The prize was awarded from the English translation. And so every other year it's fiction, every other year it's nonfiction.
Oh, the New England Poetry Club gives a lot of awards for poetry, and one of them is something called the Der Hovenessian for a translated poem. Not sure what time of year you apply and so forth. That's something that exists.
I had a question about the Art Omi translation lab, because I didn't realize that they only funded you. I thought they funded the author's travel expenses. So so when you apply,
I think they
mean,
do.
oh,
No, they
No?
fund everybody's room and board, and they'll fund getting you from New York City to the
But no,
grounds.
what I put in the chat, it says all residences are fully funded, including airfare.
From
tra-
New
and
York
tra-
City to the Art
No.
Omai
They're not going to
campus.
fly you from New York to Omai. It means airfare from wherever to New York, and train like Amtrak from New York City to Hudson. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Ewald got, when I went, and I think we both got our transportation paid for. I could be wrong, Tanya, but that's how I understand it. The word airfare is in there.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I'm confused now and don't remember, but
It
maybe
might have
they
changed
did.
from anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they do. I'll see if I can look.
because it
By the
would be
way,
hard to
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
mean, it would be hard to apply and commit an author to doing that if you don't, an international travel. That's
Yeah, I
asking
guess
a lot.
I'm misremembering.
It's also possible it's changed, Tanya. I think it was the very first time they did it when you and I were there. So, and it's been going every year since.
Yep, I'm gonna poke around now.
I just remembered another fellowship, by the way, that hasn't come up, which I got many years ago. It's the Howard Foundation. I'll try to. It's an odd one because the Howard Foundation at Brown University, they have this. They cycle through fields. So I think it's like every 3 years. It's literary arts, including translation. I got that. Got a long time ago now, 2010 or something. I know Jeffrey Brock got one. There are a few other translators that I know that had those. Very few people have heard of it, but it actually was. I mean, I also got a pen. The Howard Foundation was way more money, but very few people have heard of it. So I'm sorry I didn't think of that sooner. I'll see if I can post some info.
Yeah, I was wrong. Translation Lab is fully funded. Thank you, Tim, as well. And it's about sort of refining a translation. So you should be far enough along to provide samples and demonstrate that the time could help you get close to or closer to a finished product.
Seems like we may be moving into the Q&A part of our event.
I
We
think
don't
we
have
had
to
some
keep you for
general
2 hours.
offerings. Yeah, I think we had a couple. Let's keep it short, but we had a couple kind of general reflections on best practices.
Yeah.
And then we can go into Q&A. So I think
Okay.
one of the things I'll mention is that some of these translation prizes are funded through the same channel as original writing and literary writing. So I would not assume that judges know anything about translation or even necessarily understand it. Well, I'm sure they do, but I would just position the project and how it's interesting to readers and writers, not just translators, and speak about it in sort of a wider context and who the author is, why they matter, and why it needs to be brought into English and why now. I think the contemporary context matters, and I think that's not always, like, I don't want us to get into a world where only the places that are having a war or that the US is invading are the literatures that we care about. Like, it felt like after the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, suddenly we were like listening to Iraqi and Afghani writers. So I think that is an unfortunate reality. So I think there's other ways to make the case for why an author matters. I think one could talk about the genre. Like, for example, when I was translating the person who I'm still translating, who I did Translation Lab with, the world was not interested in literature from Ukraine necessarily, but I said that he kind of invented a genre and was, pushing genre boundaries and language in ways that didn't yet exist in English language American literature. So that was kind of a case that I made. Kate, Nancy, or others, did you have sort of like general advice? I know some of you have also been judges, so maybe you have bigger tips.
I wanted to be sure to mention that Marguerite Feitlowitz, who is a DC Alt board member, has offered her services for free. She has an NEA. She's got 2 Fulbrights and a number of other grants for research, travel, and writing. She used to run the Bennington College translation program, but she's willing to help folks with their applications one-on-one, in pairs, or in small groups. So she is traveling somewhere, but she couldn't be with us today to offer those services.
And the only thing I really want to add to that is as to what Tanya said already. I just had the experience recently of reading several people's sort of introductions to work, whether it was a book or something else. And the thing that I noticed, and I think this is absolutely universal to translators, is we are so involved in our work. We are so clear on why this little project with this little writer in this little corner of the world is so special, and why doesn't everybody else see that? And it's really incumbent on us to paint the big picture, at least a paragraph of the big picture in our applications, so that people who don't know our writers and don't know our languages, and probably in my case, I do a lot of work from Azerbaijan. A lot of people don't even know where that is in the globe. So, it feels like dumbing it down in some ways, but it's absolutely essential to bring the judges along with you on your journey of why this writer and why this work is so important. And that sort of setting the stage is something that, when you only have 250 words, it's really hard to give some of them to that. But if you don't, you run the risk of not connecting with the judges.
So now Q&A, Tanya?
Yeah, we would love to hear from you all. I
Can
feel
I
like
just point to
there-
a comment? Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, Tanya, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's so much expertise in this room. I feel like anyone could be sharing. But go ahead, Kate.
No, I just wanted, Frida Afari, who's the current co-chair of the PEN Translation Committee, has just put an invitation in the comments suggesting that people join the translation committee. You do have to be a member of PEN. But hi Frida. Because of the pandemic, the translation committee has been all online for the past few years. I think it's going back to a hybrid format, but it means that those of us who don't live in New York and can't gather at the local bar can still take part in the organization, which, as we all understand, is going through some difficult times right now. But it's, for translators, it's a tremendous opportunity to find community with people who are doing something that you do. And we've had people coming in from Vietnam, we've had people coming in from Hungary to take part in these meetings. And I encourage you to join. And if you have criticisms of PEN, that's a place where you can make your voice heard as well. So highly recommended. Thank you, Frida.
Are we going to general questions now? I have a
Yes, I
general
think
question.
so. So I wanted to also mention that Alta is scheduling their virtual Write the Book Day on Tuesday. And so it's 1 day only. There are 4 panels, 2 of which are marketing related, how to get your books published. I'm on one of them with Chad Post and 2 publicists. And they'll talk about creating the buzz and what to do with your book. And there's another great panel that's going to have more about pitching your books and how to locate the publishers. And then there's I think Chen Sin, our president of Alta, is going to be talking about AI and its uses in translation. And there is another panel as well. So it's four panels, and there's no competition in them. One happens early in the day, one happens midday, one happens a little later. But that's Tuesday, and registration is on the Alta page. But also I said,
are they being recorded so that if you sign up and you can't see all of them because it's all through the day, they can?
I believe so. That's how Alta usually does things, that if you pay, I think it's $15 for the day. And then if you're not able to see it, I believe, but
They will.
Kelsey is the person. Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
okay. They will. Good. There we have instantaneous answer thanks to AI.
Okay, I'm sorry, Frida, who hasn't said anything. I'm going to mute.
Thank you. Do you have a handout with all the information that you offered today?
Funny you should ask.
I've been volunteered to try and put all of this amazing information together in something a little tidier and easier to read. I guess my question is, how do I distribute it to people who are interested?
We should have the Zoom. I'm going to be quiet because I'm not the host, so I can't answer that question. So
I am the host who is barely functioning here as host. maybe the best thing is if you would like to get a copy of this, I will put out here my email and just say, hey, Nancy, be sure to send me something. So I'm going to put here if I can.
Yeah, and we did our best, but it's like it's such a mess out there to try to get a list. So honestly, that thing that Katie put in the chat earlier, and I'll put again, I think is the most comprehensive thing I've ever seen of translation funding and other opportunities. So we haven't checked if ours are already on there. We just didn't know about it until today. But we'll send around a very basic list of links that we
And I
talked
think
about today.
I think, Frida, correct me if I'm wrong, was there talk about Penn working on the grants database that we have on the website to update it?
Perhaps this could be the basis for updating it. Yes.
Yeah, and I think Alta has talked about that too, because the list just change all the time, and it's good to have the ones that are no longer available off the list, and then the new and upcoming ones on the list too. Yeah.
Great.
So I have a general question, for you, all of you smart people. People are talking about residencies, and I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued about the idea of a residency and how that helps on a project, and to just talk in general about it. Does it really contribute? Is taking yourself out of your normal day-to-day really let you focus? I can see how the Scotland one, where they cut your internet access, would really be helpful. But then what about all those dictionaries? But just in general, our residency is something to consider and look at.
I have
So-
really mixed feelings about this, even though I've done multiple and found them like kind of life-changing, is that they really do not do a good job of accommodating people with kids and pets. I've not found a single one that allows you to bring a pet, and that may sound ridiculous, but that's really prohibitive for me. To go away for a month, like to the cost of getting a dog sitter, and also just the emotional well-being that having a dog provides my translation, so I think that there's some that are starting to be better about it. So that's my critique. I feel like it's like designed for people who just like have enough money to have someone else like take care of their kids or their pets. That said, I don't think it's for everybody. Like I know plenty of people who like to walk around their life in the city that they live in. That's like what gives them inspiration. I always felt like when I was at residencies, I was like worried because it seemed like other people were more productive than me. I've never been someone who can just sit for 4 to 8 hours a day and just work. Like that's just never been how I am. And so I just accepted that for me, because most of the residencies that I did were in beautiful places, like, it was also about rest. And honestly, like that's just as valuable for me to just, the stuff that I translate is really heavy. And so getting a chance to, yes, I did more translation in the 2 week or the month that I was at those places than I would have had I been home. Absolutely. But was I working like, head on to the grindstone every day? No, I was like hiking and swimming and, and I met the author that I translate for the first time. And so just getting to know him, and that's just the translation lab opportunity. I think that's the only one I know of that brings authors and translators together. So that's my perspective. It was lovely. And also the community building. When I did both of them, I was quite young and new to it. And I got to meet amazing people who've been very kind champions for me throughout the years. And I think for anyone, just the community translators I find are so generous that it's just good to know other translators. And the residencies like Vermont Studio Center, where you are there at the same time as visual artists, I find it so enriching. Somebody like made paper mache with the printouts of my translations. Like it was just so cool.
For me, it was kind of and I don't even have children or a spouse, but so it was still kind of a room room of my own moment in my life, like just having, and I've been to the same place twice in Tennessee that has a you pay modestly. And so I drove all the way from central Pennsylvania to Tennessee to be there both times. So it was kind of a road trip. I like that. But really just being there, and there were only a couple of other people who were writers, not translators, but just being away from the daily phone call, the daily interruptions, the daily stuff, being surrounded by all the things I need to do, all of that just gave me a clarity of mind that I really had never suspected. I had never suspected possible. And so it was well worth the time spent on the road, driving down and back. I happened to have friends halfway, so I could stay overnight with them going and coming and didn't have to pay a motel on top of it. But I have applied to a couple of residencies where you don't have to pay, but I haven't been accepted in any of those yet. But to me, it was, I would not have believed that it could clear my mind so much. So that even though I also am not somebody who can sit around and translate for 8 hours a day. But when I walked away and came back, I still remembered what I was doing because I hadn't had half a dozen interruptions in the meantime. So, so I just really appreciated the opportunity.
And I think, Neil, you make a great point in the chat about not everyone counting translators as writers. I've had the experience where they don't specify explicitly, and if you message them, they'll say, oh yeah, we count translators. So it's always worth asking. And this is a bit off topic, but I just remembered that I applied for one that I didn't get, that I'd never heard of, that does also pay writers and translators, the Fondation Jean Michalski in Switzerland. Does anyone know this one? I'd never encountered it, and it's fully funded, and they emphasize translators. And
Jennifer Croft had it. Jennifer Croft wrote, I think, published a couple of articles even about having been there.
Okay. Yeah, it seems extremely competitive and kind of a dream. And for whatever reason, under advertised, maybe intentionally.
Residencies, I don't know if we as translators are quite as accustomed to them as writers. I mean, it's a sort of staple in the writing community, right? You go off and you do your residency and you build your resume off of, I went to the Malay colony and I went to, wherever. So for us, it's still a new thing. And I guess I wanted to echo what Tanya said, that it's very personal as to whether it's going to be the right thing for you. I personally would not do them often, but I also, the first residency I got was in a castle with a chef. I mean, there's not too much topping that. So I'm not really actively looking around for them. I will also say this. So there were a couple of other Russian language translators who happened to be there when I was, and that community, not just with them, but with the other translators there, has been really vital to me. And I this is something I should have said earlier. We in the United States tend to be very America focused, but I want to encourage people to look to the UK for prizes, for residencies, for publishers, because there is also a very active translation community there. But it's an English language speaking universe for us that most of us have not sampled as deeply as we can. And I would also say the Translators Association there, the TA, is very, very active. They don't have the constraints that we have in the States talking about or advocating for translators' salaries. So they're very open about it on their website. There's a lot of opportunity in the UK for us as translators. And I just encourage people to be open-minded to prizes, residencies, publishers beyond our geographic borders.
Yeah, and I just applied for something through the British Center for Literary Translation. They have schools, study, emerging translators, and they have some what they call bursaries, I guess is like a scholarship. And I applied for what's called a training the trainer, where they train people who want to teach literary translation. And I was accepted, but I didn't get a scholarship. And it's all virtual. And it's going to be a week this summer. So I'm just thinking about whether I want to pay the like out of pocket costs, but it's something to look into in the future. I'll put it in the chat.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? All right. Katie, I think you're
Over
up.
to me. Well, I think that, I mean, there's so much to talk about, but also a lot of you on here are very experienced anyway. So I thought I'd just kind of sum up some key takeaways, and then you guys can say yes, no, or add to them if you find that might be useful. So I think the first takeaway for me is, Nancy Naomi, this is all very subjective. Awards, winning grants and funding and bursaries and residencies. It's all very subjective. And so these are all good things for us to do as translators, in addition to translating. But we shouldn't obsess, maybe, right, Nancy? We should to put it into perspective and not panic. Make it part of the kit, but not let it kind of dominate our focus. The other takeaway is, if you decide to focus on grants and awards and any of this, you have to plan ahead. And Tanya, you made this point really well. Be really methodical, research, watch dates, track things. I think spreadsheets are the answer for all of this. I have a mini one for myself, and I look at this other one that I sent you the link to, but it feels like the more the merrier, or the more complete, perhaps. The third one I think is really interesting. Consider the specialty awards, the specialty opportunities that are language specific or style specific or genre specific. And again, that requires research into the country and into languages, but that way you can focus your efforts and maybe get a more focused result. And then working with the publisher, I found this interesting in my book that was published last year, when I was really interested in applying for awards. And most of them I couldn't apply for. The publisher had to apply for. So this idea of, being on top of your publisher to make sure that they're, applying for the awards, participating in any grants or any other funding that you might want to get post-publication. And I just like that little tidbit about looking to the UK for opportunities, because there are quite a few there for translating into English. Anybody else have takeaways? If
Apply
not,
all the time. I just make it a goal to like apply for at least 5 grants a year and just keep applying. Like, it's just my job.
thank you. Part of the job. 5. I'm making a note. I'm going to apply for 5 this year.
And this is not specific to us, but I just wanted to put out a call. I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but I've had this experience now with my state arts council. I've had this experience with local literary festivals. There are so many people, even in the writing community, who don't consider literary translation to be an art. They don't know what it is. They don't know how it works. They think you run the text through a computer. If there is any possible way to advocate at the very local level, your city council or whatever it is, for translation as an art form. I mean, you can point to the NEA, but I still cannot wrap my head around how in this day and age, when you go to a literary festival, they literally will not accept translated material for discussions. Even if you can have your author present, even if your author could be present online, how are we not getting the message out that this is an art form and that it's worth appreciation as an art form?
they think if you speak a foreign language and you hear somebody say something, naturally you could put it in English. That's not any work at all.
Right.
Right. But I also get this all the time from poets, which is my area, my discipline, other poets who don't speak languages, who just say right out, I don't read work in translation because I can't read the original language. It can't be any good. It's not the original.
Yeah.
And when you, and that is, that's within the literary community, you know, people who know about poetry, you know, there are many more hoops to jump through outside the literary community into the larger community.
Not
Well,
to mention poetry and how people
exactly.
marginalize
Exactly.
poetry because it's not
Mhm.
fiction and we can't make a movie out of it.
Mhm.
And then we get into translated poetry. You're double marginalized.
Right.
Mhm.
That
I
little
mean, with-
Italian phrase has really hurt us. What's it? I can't speak Italian, but basically it says something like translator, traducer, or something.
Mhm.
Traductori,
Yeah.
I
trader.
mean, does that mean those poets would not want to be translated into other languages because it wouldn't be good?
I think you might have an argument from some of them that that's exactly right. So
Yeah.
it's self-limiting, obviously, but it's a bigger problem for us in terms of having our work properly appreciated and paid for. I can tell a story in this community that I was recently offered a book-length translation project from a major university press, and they wanted to pay me the equivalent of 5 cents a word. I mean, that is just
Yeah.
so insulting. I mean, you know, what do you do with that, right? And I, you know, it's not like I just came on the block. So it's. I mean, this is a problem throughout the industry, and also the, you know, as we've all been hearing about AI, is AI going to just replace us? Why should they pay us when they can get the machine to do it? But I think it's a genuinely an inability to understand the creative mind and why there would be anything creative about what we do, and why it's worth paying for.
Great point. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a downer to end on.
No, but it's in process. I can share with you, I did meet with the director of the National Book Festival and with other members of the Library of Congress, and they are increasingly very interested in literature and translation and incorporating that in many different ways into the activities that the library is developing with the community all the time, and the book festival, major, the National Book Festival, which is going to feature a couple of translators this year for the first time, I think, which they haven't announced yet. So I won't give it away, but it's going to be good. Anyway, so any other comments, observations?
Just to say that this event that I'm glad you have stayed to the end is brought to you by the DC Area Literary Translators Association. And one of the ways we can advocate is to be part of collectives. We have representation from the Northwest Collective, Avia from the Third Coast, I think, in Chicago. And so banding together with other translators to try and affect change and advocate for change is a positive way to approach things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nancy, Naomi. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Catherine, Kate. That was a really brilliant presentation, and thanks for everybody's contributions.
Thank you all.
Thank you all
All
for
right.
your contribution.
Thank you.
Hit no recording.